Sí, ahora, sí. Vamos tomando asiento, por favor.
Let's have a seat, please.
Bueno, Susan, te vemos en pantalla. Estupendo.
Ahora me escucháis también.
Vale.
Can you hear me?
¿Sí? ¿Oye?
Sí, cuando nos digas.
Espera.
You can get started
¿Oye
whenever
bien
you
o
feel
subo
like
el
it.
sonido?
Can you hear me? Should I disconnect from the call? Okay, we're live. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to continue in this first day in the symposium of the relations between the European Union and CELAC, creating certainty in the face of common challenges. We had a very intense and interesting morning, and we mentioned and addressed three of the points in this roadmap adopted in the European Union CELAC summit under the Spanish presidency of the European Union last July in Brussels. One of the main topics in this roadmap and in that statement is justice and security for citizens and governance models. How to create certainty. What a best way to address the right governance models and justice models that can ensure that governance and state the priorities or achieve the priorities that we have established. We have two wonderful um, panelists. Unfortunately, Susan Gratius, international relations teacher from the university, the Autonomous University of Madrid, wasn't able to be here in person because she was just told that she's going to have surgery. So we really hope that she can recover as soon as possible. But because of this event, she hasn't been able to travel. But even at that, she wanted to make the effort to be with us, even though this is going to happen remotely. I hope that you can see us adequately, and we want to thank you for being here with us. We are going to give you the floor in the first place. We have two 20-minute interventions, and then we will hear, after Susan, we will hear Juan Martinez Moya, a member of the Coordination and Follow-up Commission of the Ibero-American Judicial Summit. He made a great effort to be with us because he just returned from Chile yesterday, and he came straight to Guadalupe to be here with us. So without any further ado, let's get to work. You have the floor, Susan. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And I really regret not being able to be present with you in the monastery of Guadalupe. I'm really sorry about that. It's really a pity. It's always more uncomfortable to be connecting remotely, but there's no alternative this time. I am going to start this panel where we will address justice and security in Latin America and Europe. The motto of these 2 days is certainties. It seems like we are all in a state of anxiety. We need certainties in these agitated times. And not only Latin Americans live in fear, Europeans also live with fear. Fear to uncertainty, inflation, um, climate change. Let's remember the Dana, the floodings in Valencia, increasing violence, etc. And there's a whole narrative that has changed. We don't speak so much from a liberal approach, but geopolitics. Um, as a German citizen, I don't like the term geopolitics that much. So geopolitics are being addressed everywhere. It's the end of the liberal era. And the European Union and CELAC, have a relationship that dates back from many years ago. They have followed regionalism and cooperative models committed with peace, the development of democracy, etc. Carlos Malamud said it very clearly. This is a story from the past because Europe is seeing how there's a war in its borders, and Latin America has inner wars, inner conflicts. There's this myth of the civil power of Europe, Europe as a regulatory power, and the myth of Latin America as zone of peace. Is all these myths are reaching an end in a way. In Latin America and in Europe, we have gone back to hard power, to very realistic narratives, and this is reflected in several areas like security and justice. There's a certain securitization in Europe. We have heard about the securitization of migration, but the same thing applies in Latin America. There are many social problems that have been securitized, and there's a very hard discourse. There's a series of problems that have to be mentioned. I'm going to make a brief diagnosis of Latin America and another one of Europe, and I will address some governance models and potential solutions. In Latin America, there is a big problem: democracy, security, and justice. You can't have three things at the same time. We're seeing that in Latin America. Democracy and security, very hard. Justice and security, hard. Democracy and justice, hard. In this sense, the first idea would be how we can merge democracy with citizen security. This is a Latin America term, citizen insecurity. And there's a fact: the homicide rate is threefold higher than the world rate, and the economic costs are high. There's a security observatory in Latin America. 3.5% of the GDP goes to pay for insecurity. And the problem is that democracy cannot be preserved with insecurity and inequality. Since the problem is large in Latin America, there has been an increase in the autocracy. The Democratic Index in 2023 told us that there were 6 hybrid regimes, 3 dictatorships or autocratic regimes, or 4 if we include Haiti, and there are 9 imperfect democracy and just 2 full democracies. In this sense, we could say that there are more non-democratic than democratic regimes. And this has a lot to do with those topics that we mentioned, justice and security. If we look at the report of there's a report that talks about democratic recession. We don't talk about democratic waves, it's the other way around. And there's a new term that was coined that is elected dictatorships, and that would lead us to Venezuela and Nicaragua. Then we have the fact that satisfaction in the face of democracy is low, 28%. That is, a high level of citizens are dissatisfied with democracy. Second topic, Latin America is an area of conflicts with internal wars. This has a lot to do with the political position. It has to do with what Erika Rodriguez mentioned in her presentation: mistrust. Because Latin America is a region that has lots of mistrust. If you don't trust the political or judiciary systems, if you can't trust your neighbors, it's hard to build democratic societies, because society requires consensus. Another similar problem is polarization, political polarization. There were countries where there was large democratic consensus, like Brazil, and there's no chance to reconcile right, left, one political project and another. The third dilemma is how to win the war, and this was addressed in the first panel, the war against organized crime on a national level. This is not possible. Regional answers are necessary, and there are no such things is not existent. In Central America, there are some attempts, but it's not enough. National plans may solve some problems like drug, which is a common problem in Latin America and Europe, but cooperation is not working in a very efficient way in this sense. So, and multilateral governance is in crisis and has other priorities. In that sense, Latin America is abandoned to a certain extent in terms of its organized crime and drug dealing problems. What other security problems are there in Latin America? The cause is another Latin American phenomenon. The incredible rates of inequality. This has been addressed. Functional states often have the monopoly of violence, and sometimes this violence is exerted against citizens themselves, like in the case of Nicaragua, Venezuela, etc. Privatization of security, and this favors, in its turn, the presence of autocratic regimes. The problem with justice, if we take a look at surveys, justice is not very well perceived. Judiciary systems um, are not very well regarded. There's a problem of cost, of access, and independence. Even in a large country like Brazil, where there's a separation of powers to a certain extent, justice was polarized if we consider the conflict that Bolsonaro had with Lula. If citizens cannot trust their own security forces and they cannot trust justice because they have inefficient, unfair, or they have been co-opted, how can democracy work? This is a very complicated dilemma or trilemma. What could solutions be in terms of justice? The first model, the most successful one in this problem, is the Bukele model, like in El Salvador, very successful and very well rewarded by citizens. Even if we don't like this, it's a fact. 90% of citizens in El Salvador support this heavy hand policy, um, prosecuting maras, incarcerating people. It's a model of security without democracy, but it seems like the balance, and this is confirmed, um, statistics confirm that this is well rewarded, and other countries are following this example. It seems to be an exported model. In Ecuador, for example, Javier Milei, sorry, we have in Ecuador, we see what's happening. Javier Milei, it's having a similar approach in Argentina, and in Honduras, it seems like this heavy hand model is succeeding.
There is a softer hand method, which has not been very successful either. So we have to say that the left has not been very good for security. It hasn't had a very good balance. If we think of Mexico, there's been demilitarization or the capitalism before the drug traffickers. In many countries, the main worry of the people is insecurity. More than 60% in Mexico, over 60% of within Costa Rica or Chile. So there is a great preoccupation between or among citizens. And there is the Uruguay model. I think that's been studied a little bit less. There is more trust, more confidence in the institutions, in justice. The drug trafficking is not as prevalent. And they have also a more positive balance regarding democracy. There are some other more positive models in the region then. So Uruguay could be one of them. I'll be very brief. I don't have a lot of time left. The trust of citizens in on the democratic institution is still quite solid, and there is a double protection in Europe regarding Europe. I'm saying no. For Europe, regarding justice, there are the national states, and there is a surveillance system on the part of the European Union, which is absent in Latin America. The CELAC does not fulfill the same function, so we don't have a parallel there. So what are the preoccupations in Europe for citizens? Fear of immigration, security of the borders. The Justice Scoreboard, the latest one speaks about gender violence, discrimination, etc. And in general, the evaluation of justice in European countries is quite positive. If we come to the independence of justice, that's a different matter. For the independence of justice in Austria, the Nordic countries, Germany, it's very well assessed. But in Spain, Italy, or Hungary, it's not well assessed. Actually, in Hungary, it is said that justice is co-opted by President Orban, or so think the citizens. Many citizens think that the European Union is an oasis of stability in a very convulsed world. And there is another positive datum. 58% of citizens in the European Union are satisfied with democracy. It's not a spectacular score, but it's much better than the one from Latin America. It's about 28%. So 30% more citizens in Europe are satisfied with democracy than in Latin America. But we also have a securitization or safety problem because of the work in Ukraine and other matters. There is a privilege towards security versus democracy and justice. We're ready to sacrifice some democracy and some justice in order for more security, in order to have more security. And after the last elections in the Parliament, European Parliament, we have 1/3 of MPs who are sovereignist, nativist, who are extreme right, and who are xenophobic thinking. That is a much more nationalist Europe as compared to preceding times. We have a much more fortress Europe. It's not as easy to enter the European Union, and and immigration has become a greater problem in Germany, for example. Olaf Scholz is a social democrat, is presiding over the government of Germany. Seems that the government will end up soon, and they're closing the borders against all of the principles of free circulation, free flow of goods and of people in the European Union. That's a very particular case in Europe, as is the case of Sweden, where there are organized crime networks, where there is a response of the army, which is similar to the one from some of the Latin American countries, as I say, in order to face that crime. In Europe, we have that dilemma or trilemma: more security also means less democracy and less justice. How to get out of that trilemma? I don't have an answer for that. We could discuss about that here. But I think that a tough hand generates many more costs in the longer term than benefits. I would have more, I would be more partisan of the Uruguay example in Latin America, and also Denmark and Finland, where there is a full respect of the rule of law. And someone said the peace is not the absence of war. It's a virtue. It's a mental state. It's a disposition for benevolence, trust, and justice. I think that we should follow that motto to work together with more passion, more resources, and more efforts together, Latin America and Europe. And if we look at an existing program, that's a pact for its second version, we have it now. And if we put only 58 million euros in order to fight organized crime, that's a drop in the ocean. We need to do a lot better than that. The director of the Foundation, Carolina, also said that. We have to work more on justice and security with the whole of Latin America. I think it'd be good to create a lab for public policies for justice and security with the best cases, with the best practices, and probably also the worst, in order to contrast governance models in Europe and Latin America. And I'd also focus not on help, but on shared programs. I think that we must create a much more horizontal relationship, because the problems that we have in Sweden, we can also find them in most Latin America. So we have to find common solutions. Thank you very much for your invitation. I'm sorry not to be able to be there in person. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Suzanne, for this, Susanna, for this presentation. No doubt that those who are scared and are pessimists have reasons to be after hearing you, after hearing your analysis of both sides, right? Each side would have their levels and their ways, but you know, security. Latin America has clear security problems, but we also have in Europe, and we have a necessity for investing on those pillars, which are both essential for democracy, justice, and security. I would remind ourselves of one encounter that took place recently in Brussels, where Josep Borrell participated. How to face organized crime when the resources of the organized crime are 4 times the gross national product of the country, and they have the money in cash. So they can buy the will of the officials, of the public administrations very quickly. So it's good to would be, as you said, the resources of that compact against organized crime are not enough. We should find new ways of funding and new methodologies able to help us to fight that insecurity. Regarding justice matters, we do have an expert coming from Chile, from an encounter of around justice in Latin America. We will listen to him, and then we will open the debate. Juan Martinez Moya, a member of the Coordination and Monitoring Committee of the Ibero-American Judicial Summit. Thank you very much for having accepted our invitation, and you have the floor. Hello, everyone. Very good morning, very good afternoon. Because people are listening to us in both sides of the Atlantic. A few hours ago, barely a few hours ago, I was in Chile, taking place in one of the meetings of the 22nd edition of the Ibero-American Judicial Summit. I will express my personal acknowledgement to you, to the S.2 Foundation, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for opening up a space to justice, to judicial instances, knowing, as we know, that they have their imperfections, because they always act ex post of facts. They are within the conflict in order to solve those conflicts. And at least for the person who's speaking to you right now, the judicial power is not to be transformed by the judiciary. We judges are not there to be activists. We are there to apply the law, but that law must be fair. It must be just. It's actually up to others to change the law or change the society. So And I've been working for many years as part of the Ibero-American Judiciary Summit, and there is a true library full of experiences and good practices that have been translated in great tools for actions. Here in the European Union, for example, we spoke about the pact. The Ibero-American Judicial Summit was present during the first and the second edition of the pact regarding the fight against organized crime. So it's good for you to be hearing us, the judiciary. And I share the analysis of Professor Susanna Gratius. I share in a high percentage of what she's been saying. But, I've had the privilege to have talked to the president of the Court of El Salvador and of the president of the Supreme Court of Uruguay. I know those courts very well and know the people in those tribunals very well, because the courts are the laws, but the court and the institutions, but it's also the people. I know that in El Salvador, people celebrate trails with the accumulation of people that would be unthinkable there, but then they explain to you about the reality, and I'm not going to judge that. It's not up to me, but it's good to know about the daily chores of the judiciary. And as Alexander Hamilton wrote in his book, The Judges as Guardians of the Constitution, the judiciary power is the least dangerous because they don't have the money and they don't have the force. Nonetheless, Alexander Hamilton said, when they act, all of the force of the state is at their service. They project to a single case, and around that case, the whole power of the state is manifested, because those who have the money and those who have the force must apply them in order to abide by those decisions taken by the judiciary if we want to respect the rule of law. The director of the Institute of High Judiciary Studies said that we judges act ex post because we're the guardians of the promises kept in the great policies in the international texts. The title of my presentation here has to do with this. The General Council of the Judicial Power, I belonged to it for quite some time, and Attorney Vocal of the Congress, Pilar Jiménez Barro, asked me to be here together with my colleagues from the coordination and follow-up of the summit, and to tell you who we are, what are our values, and what are our worries. Well, I'd say it's pretty much what we've heard here. And I will say to you that we, I would like to speak to you about our whereabouts, and I will say that the perfect type of justice does not exist, that it is context dependent, and I'll tell you about our experiences regarding judicial security and international judicial cooperation, which is key now, as a key element, as a tool, as an instrument in order to combat organized crime, for example. So capturing those people, the fact that organized crime has come to be part of some institutions, that's really bad, that's a high risk, and so we have to see the experience that we have regarding that. What is the Ibero-American Judicial Summit? It's an organization underpinning the collaboration of 23 different judicial powers, because it includes the chiefs, the different countries that are part of the Chiefs of State meeting, plus Puerto Rico. Our obsession, and I've been there for years, is not to dwell on the programs, our goal is to share experiences, because speaking about judicial independence goes beyond the national. It goes beyond Spain. It's about Europe. Judicial independence cannot be understood from a national perspective, from a country perspective. That belongs to the international judicial community. And as for actions, we'll have to see how to work together using a single language, respecting obviously our differences as well. We have our own permanent structures, we have our commissions, and many of the documents that are quoted in academic works, for example, the Inter-American Commission for Judiciary Ethics, or the IBERED judicial instrument, those were born at the Ibero-American Summit, and also its decalogue, but the well-functioning of justice in Ibero-America. During our 22nd edition of the summit, we've been working around 4 fundamental axes: the technological fact, artificial intelligence in the decision making in the judicial world. Secondly, access to justice, especially for people in a state of vulnerability. Then organized crime, and then protocols or practical guides for approaching complex trials, macro trials. We cannot have common judicial procedures in all 23 countries, but we could have common guidelines in order to approach a macro judge for organized crime. Later on, I'll speak to you about the need, and that'll be the key theme that we are working around in our summit. That'll be the approach for specializing the judiciary organs, and that implies working intensely around digital independence, specialization, security for judges, men or women, and establishing instruments in order to combat organized crime from the judiciary. We cannot combat organized crime with 19th century judicial structures for criminal investigation, for judicial investigation. We need to do things that the European Union already envisages through their own procedures in order to fight crime, organized crime, by always accepting the respecting the independence of the judiciary. You have you can see your website, and the Judiciary Summit might not be as known as other events or institutions. We are facing some cases now that have been quite difficult. For example, the constitutional reform in Mexico, whether we should or not do an election, a popular election of federal judges or not.
This alters the elemental standards that affect the judiciary independence, that ensures the equality and justice and the possibility of having quality justice. But the Ibero-American Judiciary Summit has had a balance in terms of the development of judicial powers, because this has always been a climate of dialogue, be institutional compliance, and respect of diversity, being aware that realities are absolutely diverse, and being aware that governance systems in the judiciary power have had weaknesses and failures, and government council systems that to a large extent was the case in Spain, and this was imported from France and Italy, the system of a government council, and these are key elements. On this, there is something, a structure that allows us to know what the right path is. We have this topic, legal security, and we see how the actors are the judiciary power and the work that we're carrying out, for example, in terms of transparency, selection, independence, social protection of magistrates. We always try to do everything in an empirical way. We carry out surveys with judiciary institutions or legal institutions, but we only carry the surveys having institutions answer these surveys because the perception of the results would be different. The magistrates also have to respond. For example, last year in the summit, when it came to judges or magistrates protections, we carried out a survey with the judges from the 23 countries. We used a technological instrument that was given to us by the judiciary power of Brazil. We were able to get answers that allowed us to glimpse the path ahead of us. And the Ibero-American Judiciary Summit was able to create a methodology for its work. I am going to focus on the security, legal or security topics. In the summit, legal security has always been connected to judiciary independence. And it's true that legal security, since Max Weber, has always been connected to economic development, the security of investors in terms of the estimation of the economic consequences. But in the summit, legal security, since we focus on empirical works to be able to compare, not to transform, but to be able to have databases of experiences where the different judiciary powers can look at themselves. Our purpose is not Max Weber's, is not the concept that Max Weber used. We don't want to design a stable framework, but to guarantee social peace and a conflict resolution. It's obvious that if we have a right framework of social peace, we will be setting or laying the foundations of economic development. Legal security is connected to previsibility and expectations, as Habermas put it. It's the classic idea of knowing that if someone is going to invest in a state, there will be an independent judiciary, and there will be structures that are swift and that create trust in the rest of the powers. In this sense, we have established for many years, we have created documents and actions that are very specific and that lead to the establishment of this soft law and this a system of recommendations, many of which are imported from the European Union with those schemes and those standards of good governance that must exist, mostly based on, and this is something that is a trend nowadays in the judiciary, we're talking about transparency, accountability, responsibility, and attention to the fact that our judicial decisions must be adequately grounded or motivated. Therefore, the Ibero-American Judicial Summit, and I'm someone who has been present in summits of heads of states. We have created tangible products. There are many weaknesses. There's much overlap in efforts. Some people don't know what we're doing. Many people will say that we are in our own world. So our goal is to disseminate our efforts because although the targets are very specific, many judiciaries have legislative initiatives, some others don't. But for example, the 100 Rules of Brasilia, an emblematic document, is being used for creating an international convention for the access to justice. And we have worked together with him. So this is fundamental. If we see what countries like Peru are doing, they have a system for access to justice, and there's a permanent committee that works very heavily on this topic. There are very specific instruments. I would like to refer to the International Judicial Convention. There are many multilateral treaties and bilateral treaties. The Ibero-American Judicial Summit is aware of the needs. Our targets are the judiciaries. We have the Princess of Recognition of Rulings, then we have the notification treaty, we have the Convention of Medellin, and we haven't been able to reach the adequate level of knowledge and working together with the executive power and the academic world. For example, we have the Pan-Hispanic Dictionary of Legal Spanish. This Pan-Hispanic dictionary that magistrates are using everywhere in Latin America has been to create consensus, at least in around language. There are many challenges. One is that diversity of systems, of legal systems, and sometimes language differences, and the dissemination or the differences in terms of systems. We have networks in all countries. In Spain and in Europe, we have in Europe we have the European judiciaries. We have manuals. We have portals. There are many tools, and we have been working on many aspects. For example, benefits coming from organized crimes. We have worked on trying to create standards. We have worked on the need to import formulas from specialized judiciaries. For example, where there are clear laws, conventions in terms of criminal law, and something basic is uh, there's the adequate selection of magistrates to guarantee stability. Legal security must be ensured by the state and by the rest of the public powers, but it also concerns the judiciary. And of course, legal security is closely connected to judicial independence. Thank you very much. I'm at your disposal if you have any questions. Thank you very much for your intervention, so full of content. This summit may not be known by many people, but it is very important when it comes to guaranteeing that all regulations can be used and that democracies are strong. I have some questions that come to mind, and I wish to invite everyone to make questions. I'm going to make some general questions. Susan Gratius, we are really grateful that you made two proposals. You talked about the need to have more resources for programs like the Pact again for the struggle against insecurity. And I would like to know what your opinion is on something. We are gathering the messages for the next the in upcoming summit in Colombia. So we want to gather the proposals. Your proposal was to have more resources for the pact. And when it comes to democracy, understanding that there's a real danger for democracy when there is organized crime that is so strong and the judiciary feels under threat. How can we face this threat that democracy is in? And do you really think that in Europe we can be in a similar risk based on the threats that you mentioned? Regarding um, Martinez Moya's intervention, we have been hearing about the um, I- Ibero-American Judicial Summit. Is there cooperation with other countries that are not part of the Ibero-American um, space, like for example the Caribbean? In more pragmatic terms, we have been hearing about the importance of technological development, technological tools, and I have some doubts that may be shared by other people. Not that long ago, in one of the courses that we organized, we were hearing about artificial intelligence, and we discussed how uh, AI could be used for justice. And this was very concerning because there was the chance that large databases, including the rulings of many processes, those databases with rulings would help create systems that would try people without judges, with a very low margin of error, that people could be tried like this. I don't know if you have an opinion about this. And then when it comes to technology, we have the balance between control, that could be the technological control of people, like what is happening in China. Cameras can control where everyone is, what they're doing, and this could be used by the state against certain citizens. So the topic of new technologies and technological developments and AI is something that we must consider. And just as I was talking about cooperation with other entities in Latin America and the Caribbean, I'm also thinking about the Ibero-American Summit works with other entities in Europe. In this case, we're talking about the Ibero-American Summit. In Spain, we are talking about Spain and Portugal. But is there any other cooperation with other entities or networks on a European level? These are some of the questions that come to mind. I don't know if any of the attendees here have other questions. Otherwise, we can start hearing the replies. Susan, please go ahead. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I think this is a very complex topic, and we could give much thought to it, and time is limited. Tomorrow, we will have more time to elaborate on this. To answer your question, I think we have to see relations as a mirror. It's not like Europe looks at Latin America and we export our experience. No, there are many shared challenges, and that's what I wanted to emphasize in my bi-regional vision. And I think there we have three levels. And the second speaker referred to it. I don't think we can talk about the national level. We have to go from the region to the interregional level. I will give an example. In terms of drugs, I think we have very similar position. The we have the decriminalization. That's a good example where we could cooperate in topics where we have some affinity. Another topic would be climate change. You were making specific questions about democracy. I think we share risks. We are seeing how there are alliances, and this is something that we are addressing in a issue in a magazine that I write for. There are alliances between the European and Latin American far right. We have the traditional political families, but now there are new political families and transatlantic bonds between new stakeholders. There's a risk of an economic recession. And we saw that in the last elections to the European Parliament. In that sense, both Latin America and the European Union share dilemmas and problems, maybe not at the same level. We are a very diverse community, but I think maybe we don't need any more summits. I think the time of general summits should finish, and maybe we could have more thematic and specific summits. That's what the second panelist presented, Ibero-American judicial summits. I think it would make more sense to have thematic networks. For example, if we consider security, rather than just like meet once, we should turn those meetings into a more permanent structure. We could have a website where we monitor the experiences that we share. It is not about opening up more dialogues. It's a matter of having more dialogues on specialized topics. Having a general summit between Latin America, Europe, and the Caribbean, well, I think we have very different challenges, and I think it would make more sense to have one summit. I think we did that in Vienna. We had a summit on social cohesion, but that was not repeated. I think we should focus on specific aspects. And a very hot topic would be security, because sometimes it undermines, some of the policies undermine democracy. So I think there are many shared challenges, and we are seeing that in the title of this meeting. Thank you so much. It's really a pity that I can't be there in person. I hope that I can be there in the next opportunity. Regarding the first question on whether we include the Caribbean, we're talking about 23 countries. It includes Brazil, Portugal, Andorra, and Dominican Republic. In fact, the next plenary assembly will take place in Dominican Republic in 2025. It includes Cuba, and there is a very active participation from all the judiciaries at the highest levels, the judiciaries and their experts, because it's a structure of a summit that doesn't just include a meeting in an assembly. There's a permanent structure with commissions. There's a gender commission that is very strong. All members are elected, and members are all part of the judiciary powers, but the purpose is to disseminate the works.
And regarding the technology, what can I tell you about that? That has been worrying us for a number of editions in your summit now. But it's a SWOT system. There are strengths and weaknesses, but the Ibero-American Summit can be seen from a highly institutional approach with high respect for all judicial systems. Since 1990, its inception up until now, it's had its own ways. There was a convergence in 2004 of countries having council government systems and others having councils together with Supreme Courts, plus other countries where they only have Supreme Courts. So organizing realities are different. My colleague, the previous speaker, was speaking about Uruguay. The Supreme Court there is the Ministry of Justice, is the Council of the Judiciary, is a huge stability there, and it's only 5 magistrates there. And there is a judicial career in a very concrete way, a concrete context. And the permanent secretariat is the permanent secretariat of the Ibero-American Summit. So I corroborate Jasnok diagnostic about Uruguay. Uruguay is very trustworthy as regards its judicial, and it's now the permanent secretary of the summit after Spain. And if you want to see how we work, well, yesterday we proved something that has to do with technology and the use of artificial intelligence. Our bank of experiences, we are actually, we touch concrete realities, the results of the group meeting that will be presented in the preparatory meeting of Madrid in June. Makes a list of experiences as far as technology goes in all 23 powers. And we've registered 124 experiences for artificial technology, or sorry, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and all of them are part of a single platform now. The Spanish judicial power is elaborating a technological project, not a program document, regarding a list of disciplinary the disciplinary resolutions, that is the destitution of uncomfortable judges. We see that. So the removal or dismissal of the judges. And we've created a technological platform using artificial intelligence in order to classify all resolutions. And I'll end up by saying that the group approved yesterday the whole structure of the final document in order to do the following. Establishing a list of compiled cases, electronic services to the citizens, tools for artificial intelligence, automation, and technology in general. One of the, one of the things that are open that people can use is the NDoc system. It's something that enables you to use the official journal of the state, etc. And you can do it in a totally anonymous way. You can do all of those consultations, also policies for promoting digital culture, monitoring, establishing protocols for monitoring and follow-up. The General Council of the Judiciary at the given point in Spain with the process, the Catalan process, we suffered very many attacks in our web, and those came from where they came, right? And we have some controls for that. And all judicial powers can share those experiences. When we share them, we are aware of what we are facing. So beyond the markers, the scoreboards, the indicators, the reports, etc. Beyond that, we also want to know by the we want to know about the perception. Many times, it's the justice must be like the Caesar's wife. She not only has to be perfect, but she needs to appear perfect, right? The judiciary must be impartial. And impartiality is the door to real rule of law, state of law. The whole doctrine of the Judicial Court of the European Union has been built on that. We're seeing the disciplinary commissions for judges in Romania, the pensions for judges in Poland, etc. So that is, let's say, co-living or living together with the doctrine of the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights. So we have some common goals. Out of those 23 countries, there is one country, I'm not revealing anything new, it's Nicaragua. Nicaragua used to have a judicial power which was very active in our summit, and for about 2 or 3 years now, they hardly come, even though they are part of some commissions. All of the commissions are voted or elected by vote by the assembly in general, and the members are usually expert in the judicial careers. So we try to find a common heritage, common values, even though some accidents might come to the rule of law, right? Thank you very much, Magistrate. Some hands raised. Floor goes now to Juan Carlos Caso, Ambassador of Spain as Subdirector General for Mexico, Central America and the Caribbean for the Secretary of State um, for South America and the Caribbean. Be very brief. How did the Ibero-American Judicial Summit approach the constitutional reform in Mexico? On what are the perspectives that this reform might what are the consequences that might have within your own summit? Well, that was part of the agenda of our commission for monitoring and follow-up. It's actually the commission itself who decided to do it. We have not been asked for any mentoring at all. The coordination committee decided to do some research on that. We're taking knowledge of it, and we will elaborate a document in order to put that into context and to be able to talk about that for the preparatory meeting in Madrid in June. It's not the first time that we have made a declaration on independence, on judicial independence. We did it in Ecuador for some specific cases in Colombia, and at a given point, Venezuela made a specific request. There, we didn't answer. The summits must follow some very concrete political balances. We know that what they had in Mexico is a constitutional reform. We're speaking about that. The summit is very respectful with the constitutions. We've taken knowledge of it. We will elaborate a knowledge, and there will be a declaration. That's everything I can tell you. Thank you very much, Professor Gimmers. Please, some volume to the microphone. Yes, thank you very much. It's very important to have autonomous judicial powers. I like to think up loud. And going back to the environment, the rights of the Latin American or Ibero-American or European citizens, could they not be respected if a given country, a given government, or a given company of one of these countries did not respect the rights of the citizen, even though there be no communitarian law or national law? Let's say at a given point, the rights of the citizens could be violated, as they have a right for being in a healthy environment. As an expert, how would you or your colleagues react, taking into account also the extraterritorial aspect? And I'm thinking of Trump. Trump is going to damage the whole world. In 4 years, he's going to destroy all of the efforts been made for the previous 20 years. I consider that the rights of the Latin American and European citizens have been violated. What could be the possibilities that the joint judicial powers of Latin America, the Caribbean, and the European Union could seize themselves and accept some requests? I know that the execution of the implementation will not be easy, but that could be a sort of awareness raising. So how would you see that? The question would have a long answer. I started by saying that the summit has its limitations. But the good thing is that, you know, there is an awareness. And key for that is having a we are speaking about shared values and shared rights here. When I was speaking about the concept of judicial independence, that goes beyond our standards. It's an international concept. In the European Union, we have a protection of the European Union heritage of our repertory, or what we call the acquis communautaire. So if there is a crime that any judicial system would enable, actually, I will explain myself better. Within the European Union, that's a model that we've been explaining. A French judge would communicate with a Spanish judge with no intermediary. Okay, we've seen it for many cases, or we've seen for Belgium the Euro order. You know, that's what we wanted to have. We wanted to have direct contact. You can talk directly to your colleagues, and there are standards, there are practices. We have created the IBER-RED system, which is a system for correspondence. The Environmental Justice Commission of the Summit is made up of almost exclusively of presidents of courts, and they are aware that the principle of territoriality could be broken, and there could be a cause, putting that in cause. We are aware that we either take it to a stable organ, to an international environmental court, or, you know, we either do that or that won't happen. That's the aspiration that we have. We would like to have a court like that. But if not, that's not possible. See, that commission I was speaking to you about was built at the instance of Argentina and Brazil in 2014. So that was barely 10 years ago. And we tried to have an awareness from the judges, the judicial operators in the Ibero-American sphere. We're speaking about over 70,000 judges. That be our direction, but I find that does not belong to the judicial power. That belongs to the states, to the political instances. We have to act when we need to act. I started by saying that the judicial power is not there to transform society. I think that instances for that are elsewhere. We are there to give answers. If it's the leading case or leader's case, maybe could contribute for other things to get done. Meanwhile, we're working in awareness raising, and we want to create an environmental juridical conscience or awareness. Don't you think that it's easy at all? Maybe as part of experts fora, we have it within us, but it's not very easy to have for all. Maybe Susanna? Yes, I wanted to react to that. I think that it's a very good idea. I think that's a very good question. We see that there is certain deficits regarding the United Nations. The United Nations are in a crisis right now, but we do have instances for trade conflicts. We have the International Criminal Court, but we don't have an instance for violations against environmental rights. I think that's a very important point. I think that can be part of next year's CELAC EU summit, because we have a great consensus here for that. Sustainable development, 2030 agenda, going against drugs and going for sustainability and against climate change. So I think we should push together in order to create such an instance, because what's going to happen with Donald Trump's government is that climate change deniers, or deniers in general, are going to put us back, several cups back. And I think the momentum is going to be lost, and we should do something. I think the judicial way is not the best, but we have a little time, and we need to accelerate legislation, environmental legislation at the international level. What's the worth for having it perfect in Latin America with the rest, if for the rest of the world it doesn't happen? So it must be local, must be national, must be international. I think that was a very good question, and it should be part of our agenda for next year. Thank you very much, Susanna. There are no further questions. I think we can be very satisfied because concrete actions, concrete proposals have been defined that we can take to next year's summit. And I think we've been touching fundamental aspects, which are at baseline of our aspirations within a democracy. We want democracies to be as perfect as possible, and we want them not to be threatened. Oh, sorry. Alberto Bruno, please. I had not raised it. Alberto Bruno from EU-CELAC Foundation, please. Yes, if I may. I didn't want to take it because I still have my hat almost on the High Commissioner's office, because I don't want to enter the Bukele model. I have my reservations about that model, which is not a model. But anyway, I wanted to say something about the creation of a universal jurisdiction, or I think that one of the problems that we should face is the regional justice mechanism, especially for the inter-American system, which is not improving, it's blocked.
Both in terms of the Commission as well as in the court. We are still waiting judicial institutions, but there are cases like the case of serious violations of human rights. Argentina could prosecute some of those cases, but there no progress is even made. And same thing in Nicaragua. I don't have a solution, but maybe that should be something that we need to strengthen, because with the exchanges with the European system. Maybe that could help us see whether that exchange help us improve the situation, because cases in the in Latin America are tried over 10 years afterwards, when the victims are already dead. There were some reactions. We still have a few minutes left for debate. The idea of professor, regarding her idea, I think maybe we could propose this as a topic. Spain or other channels could propose this to be included in the next summit that will take place in Colombia, because I know it's going to be very hard to have this included, but it would be an instrument for awareness raising. I will give an example of extraterritoriality in my field, in monetary aspects. When Trump exited the agreements with Iran, European companies immediately, the day after, had to stop operating in Iran because the contracts had been signed in dollars. So the US said, it's my currency, and that gives me the right to take reprisal measures against companies. There were many French companies, like, for example, there were automobile companies and Total, which is an oil company, etc. And this is a case of extraterritoriality through the use of the currency, the dollar. And this is a question for jurists. How can we invent something similar in terms or for the environment and citizenship? This is the human right to have a future for you and your children. This human right doesn't apply any longer, and that's universally. So we could create a world alliance on this. So if we propose this in the summit's agenda, right now there is no legislation in this direction, but maybe this could be something that we could present to the United Nations and to other organizations, because I can see the exit as a trade reprisal, just as the US threatened European companies after the Iran agreement. Thank you very much. And complementing this idea, in judicial systems, and there have been very specific cases, for example, in the case of the European Union, there are judiciaries that belong to the network of tribunal inspection network. The European Commission asked us to give numbers of environmental proceedings. And in the case of Spain, for example, we found that we have a hard time offering numbers of environmental proceedings because we all think of criminal proceedings. But there may be administrative procedures that are much more serious, that involve the administrations, for example. And in other countries, for example, in France, they have they put a lot of care in selecting these cases and identifying them. But our judiciary statistic systems, and I hope that AI may help to improve this, our system so far doesn't allow us to have a statistic database, because not all cases are criminal. Many cases are in a blurry area between between criminal or administrative. And there is also a matter that is the specialization of courts, of magistrates. Some countries have magistrates that are specialized in environmental justice. I always give the example there is a specialization in human rights, violence against women. This would be unthinkable 20 years ago to have specific tribunals that was understood as something criminal or even something private. And awareness changes, culture changes in order to establish the organic structure. That's very important. It's like the construction, the building. We have to see the path ahead of us. Otherwise, things just stay in an ethereal level. Thank you very much. We are very lucky to have the Embassy of Colombia. They were taking good note of everything here. So part of the work is being made. And I want to emphasize that we are very happy with this panel because we're going to leave this meeting with very specific proposals. I think we have earned our rest. Susan, you haven't visited Guadalupe. So we take good note of it and we wait for you for the next meeting. We're gonna take a guided tour of the monastery. We would love to have you here next time, and we want to thank both you and the magistrate for your interventions. Thanks to everyone here, and those of us who are following us online, thanks to the interpreters. I know they suffered because sometimes the interventions were very fast, so we want to thank them for their work. I hope that they can rest because tomorrow we will have another very intense meeting. I'm sure it'll be just as interesting. So, have a wonderful evening, everyone.